They were charming on camera, elegant in tuxedos, and idolized by millions. But behind the spotlight, they were ticking time bombs, reckless, violent, and completely out of control. Hollywood loved them, but feared them just as much. During the golden age of Hollywood, the public only saw what the studios allowed them to see, behind the carefully staged photographs and studio-polished interviews. However, many of the era's biggest stars were dangerously unhinged. Some had tempers so explosive they sent co-stars fleeing from set. Others had addictions so destructive they left a trail of broken marriages, battered hotel rooms, and ruined careers. This video uncovers 21 of the most dangerous men of classic Hollywood, not just because of what they did on screen, but because of the chaos they unleashed in real life. You've seen their movies. Now it's time to see their real faces. Let's begin with the first dangerous legend of old Hollywood, a man whose roguish charm masked a dark and deeply troubling life off-screen. One Errol Flynn, the devil in a tuxedo. To audiences, Errol Flynn was the swashbuckling hero of Captain Blood and the Adventures of Robin Hood, a dashing figure with a devil-may-care smile and sword in hand. But off-camera, Flynn was the embodiment of reckless indulgence and dangerous appetites. Flynn's behavior was so wild and unfiltered, it birthed the now infamous phrase, "in like Flynn," a reference to his brazen, unapologetic womanizing. But it wasn't just flings and flattery. In 1942, he was charged with statutory rape of 2 underage girls. Though he was acquitted, thanks in part to a star-studded legal team and studio intervention, the trial forever stained his name. Behind the scenes, Flynn was an alcoholic, a drug addict, and a man teetering on the edge. He was banned from hotels, trashed film sets, and was once caught having sex in a dressing room during production. His relationships were turbulent and often abusive, and many who worked with him described his presence as volatile, equal parts seductive and threatening. By his early 50s, years of substance abuse and unchecked hedonism had ravaged his health. When he died in 1959, the autopsy revealed the body of a 75-year-old man, though he was just 50. He may have been Hollywood royalty, but Errol Flynn lived and died like a man convinced he was untouchable. 2. Marlon Brando, brilliance on screen, brutality in life. Marlon Brando revolutionized acting with his raw, magnetic presence in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. But behind his status as a method acting icon lay a deeply fractured man. A man whose private life was marred by abuse, control, and chaos. Brando's temper was infamous. Colleagues feared him for his frequent outbursts and passive-aggressive manipulation. On set, he was known to physically intimidate directors, refuse to learn lines, and sabotage scenes when he felt disrespected. But it was in his personal life that his volatility turned truly dangerous. His relationship with his wives and lovers was marked by emotional and physical abuse. His first wife, Anna Kashfi, accused him of domestic violence, and court records from their bitter custody battle over their son, Christian, revealed an unstable household steeped in trauma. The Brando family saga turned tragically criminal in 1990 when Christian shot and killed Dag Drolet, the boyfriend of his half-sister, Cheyenne Brando. Christian was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, while Cheyenne, who accused Brando of abuse and neglect, later died by suicide. Brando's silence, his wealth, and his fame helped bury the damage for years. But those close to him knew the brilliance that captivated the world came at a horrific cost. He was not just difficult, he was dangerous, especially to those who dared love him. 3. Lawrence Tierney, Hollywood's real-life thug. Before he played the cold-blooded Joe Cabot in Reservoir Dogs, Lawrence Tierney was already typecast, for good reason. In the 1940s and 50s, he made a name for himself in film noir roles, portraying criminals and brutes. But Tierney wasn't just acting. He was living the role. Tierney was a serial brawler with over dozens of arrests on his record. Drunk and disorderly, assault, resisting arrest, you name it, he was booked for it. In fact, his off-screen antics were so disruptive that many studios stopped hiring him altogether. Not because he lacked talent, but because he was a walking liability. Co-stars often refused to work with him, fearing his unpredictable behavior. He once smashed a drinking glass over a producer's head. Another time, he stripped naked during a party, leapt into a fountain, and then picked a fight with the police who tried to detain him. Even Quentin Tarantino later admitted that casting Tierney in Reservoir Dogs was a mistake, calling him a complete lunatic who nearly came to blows with multiple cast members. Despite his clear self-destruction, Tierney kept crawling back into the Hollywood spotlight, largely because no one could deny his on-screen magnetism. But behind the scenes, he left a wake of broken furniture, broken contracts, and broken jaws. Lawrence Tierney wasn't just a tough guy in the movies. He was one in real life, and he didn't care who got hurt proving it. Let's now turn to an actor whose soft-spoken demeanor belied a spiraling addiction and a murder-suicide that shocked even the most jaded corners of Hollywood. Star 4, Gig Young, the Oscar winner turned killer. He won an Academy Award for his role in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And charmed audiences with his wit and polished delivery. But behind the Hollywood glamour, Gig Young was a ticking time bomb, spiraling through alcoholism, depression, and paranoia, with a tragic ending that still haunts old Hollywood historians. Young's career in the 1940s and 50s painted him as a refined supporting actor, always the gentleman, never the lead. But what fans didn't see was his decades-long battle with severe alcoholism, which caused erratic behavior on set and torpedoed countless roles. He was even fired from Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddle on the first day of shooting, reportedly too drunk to even stand. He married 5 times. Many of these relationships were plagued by abuse and volatility, with ex-wives citing emotional torment, rage episodes, and threats. But it was his 5th and final marriage that ended in bloodshed. In 1978, just 3 weeks after marrying actress Kim Schmidt, Young shot her dead in their New York apartment, then turned the gun on himself. The motive? Still unclear. But friends pointed to his declining mental state, intensified by career failure and substance abuse. The man who once played the suave supporting role had become a Hollywood horror story, one that no studio could sanitize. Gig Young wasn't just troubled. In the end, he became lethally unhinged. 5. George C. Scott, the General of Fury. George C. Scott may be best remembered for his fiery portrayal of General Patton, but the passion he channeled on screen often exploded uncontrollably in real life. Scott was not just intense, he was combustible. His temper was notorious across the industry, earning him a reputation as one of the most difficult and intimidating actors to work with in old Hollywood. Though he avoided the law more than some on this list, Scott's emotional volatility often translated into emotional abuse and psychological warfare. He drank heavily, sometimes excessively, and his relationships suffered for it. He married 5 times, including 2 separate marriages to the same woman, actress Colleen Dewhurst, both of which ended due to his drinking and rages. Colleagues described him as both a genius and a tyrant, prone to screaming matches with directors and frequent walkouts during productions. On multiple occasions, he was known to physically threaten crew members when things didn't go his way. His erratic behavior almost derailed entire films, and many studios saw him as a liability, even when his performances were undeniable. Scott famously refused his Oscar win for Patton, calling the awards show a meat parade. That bold defiance mirrored his life, brilliant, bold, and often out of control. He wasn't a man who played with rage. He lived in it. And while he didn't leave bodies behind, the emotional destruction he caused was deep and far-reaching. 6. Robert Mitchum. Cool on screen, chaotic off it. Robert Mitchum projected an effortless cool. The sleepy eyes, the lazy drawl, the cigarette hanging from his lips. He was noir's ultimate anti-hero, embodying characters who walked the line between sinner and saint. But the line blurred dangerously in real life. Mitchum's off-screen behavior was a mix of defiance, vice, and violence. In 1948, he was arrested in a police sting for smoking marijuana, a scandal that nearly ended his career. Though he served only a brief sentence, the mugshot haunted him for decades. Unlike others who hid their crimes, Mitchum wore his like a badge of honor, bragging about his time behind bars and openly mocking the press that covered it. But the weed bust was just the beginning. Mitchum was aggressively confrontational, known for drunken outbursts, bar fights, and throwing punches on set. Several directors claimed he was uncooperative, especially when intoxicated, and had to be coerced into finishing scenes. One producer even recalled Mitchum slamming a co-star into a wall during a disagreement, then laughing it off moments later. He had a dangerous swagger that Hollywood couldn't quit, even when it should have. Studios cleaned up his messes, spun his arrests into bad boy branding, and ignored the trail of bruised egos, and sometimes bodies he left behind. Mitchum didn't just flirt with danger. He romanced it, danced with it, and brought it home for breakfast. Ready for the next name on this dark journey through old Hollywood? Number 7. Spencer Tracy, the studio's greatest secret, 250 words. Spencer Tracy is revered as one of the finest actors in cinematic history, an Oscar winner, a devout Catholic on paper, and the beloved screen partner of Katharine Hepburn. But behind the camera, Tracy was a man battling inner torment, deep-seated rage, and unchecked alcoholism. From early in his career, Tracy struggled with a violent temper and a drinking problem that often spiraled into dangerous territory. He would disappear from sets for days at a time, only to be found drunk and disheveled in hotel rooms. When drunk, Tracy could become physically aggressive, with reports surfacing over the years of verbal tirades, furniture smashed, and even physical assaults on colleagues. His marriage to Louise Treadwell was distant and fraught. Though they never divorced, Tracy lived separately for decades and was known to have extramarital affairs, most famously with Katharine Hepburn. Yet, even that iconic relationship was said to be marked by volatility. Hepburn reportedly put up with his drunken rages, once telling a friend, "He's not a bad man, but he is a very dangerous one when he drinks." The studios did everything to shield his image, often paying off journalists, suppressing negative stories, and pulling police strings to keep his record clean. But those close to him knew Spencer Tracy's brilliance came at a terrible cost. He wasn't just a troubled soul. He was a man haunted by guilt, rage, and self-destruction, and it spilled over onto everyone near him. The next actor on our list was more than just a terror behind the scenes. He was a man whose erratic behavior, destructive rage, and repeated violent arrests made him practically uninsurable in Hollywood. 8. Oliver Reed, a storm in human form. British actor Oliver Reed was as explosive off-screen as he was magnetic on it. Though his most famous roles came later in life, like in Gladiator, his prime in the 60s and 70s was a blur of booze, brutality, and barroom brawls. Reed wasn't just a heavy drinker. He was a self-proclaimed alcoholic brawler who courted danger like it was part of his brand. He was banned from countless pubs in London, arrested multiple times for fighting, and became infamous for turning press interviews into violent spectacles. One journalist recalled how Reed, mid-interview, suddenly threw a punch, claiming the man had looked at him wrong. Another time, he allegedly bit a journalist's hand. Reed once fought an entire rugby team at a bar while filming in Ireland. He drank 8 pints of beer, a dozen shots, and a bottle of rum in a single afternoon, then tried to pick a fight with the team's captain. He ended the day in the hospital with a shattered jaw. His personal life was just as chaotic. Lovers described him as charming one minute, violent the next. His marriage was turbulent, and friends feared what he might do when the drinking turned dark. Studios tolerated him only as long as they had to. By the 1980s, he was largely unemployable in Hollywood. His talent was undeniable, but so was the danger that came with it. Reed didn't just lose control, he lived in it. 9. Klaus Kinski, madman with a camera close-up, 250 words. Few actors embodied chaos like Klaus Kinski. Known for his electrifying performances in Werner Herzog's films such as Aguirre, The Wrath of God, and Nosferatu the Vampire, Kinski's genius was overshadowed by his disturbing, dangerous behavior, both on and off set. To work with him was to risk your sanity or your life. Director Werner Herzog, who collaborated with Kinski multiple times, later admitted he once planned to kill him on location, describing the actor as a raving maniac who screamed at crew members, destroyed props, and once held an axe to a team member's throat. Herzog even claimed the crew regularly begged him to fire Kinski for fear of their safety. But the darkest revelations came after his death. In her 2013 memoir, Kinski's daughter, Paula Kinski, alleged that her father had sexually abused her for years, beginning when she was just 5 years old. Her account was detailed, harrowing, and supported by her siblings, painting a portrait not just of a volatile actor, but a monster hiding in plain sight. Throughout his life, Kinski was arrested multiple times for assault and public disturbance. Friends and co-stars abandoned him. Studios hesitated to hire him despite his undeniable talent. He wasn't just difficult or troubled. Klaus Kinski was explosively dangerous, emotionally unstable, and, according to those who knew him best, terrifyingly evil. Our 10. Jerry Lewis, the tyrant behind the laughter, 250 words. To the public, Jerry Lewis was the king of slapstick, a comedic genius who defined generations of laughter through zany antics and exaggerated expressions. But off-screen, Lewis was controlling, explosive, and often cruel, especially to those who worked beneath him. As his fame grew, so did his ego. On set, he demanded absolute authority, often screaming at crew, firing assistants mid-shoot, and even humiliating extras in front of entire casts. Reports describe his tantrums as frequent and vicious, especially when he was under pressure. He would sometimes halt production for hours until everyone apologized for imagined slights. No one was spared, not even veteran actors who dared question him. But the most chilling testimonies came in later years, when multiple women alleged that Lewis abused his power to coerce and intimidate. One actress recalled being locked in his dressing room as he exposed himself and refused to let her leave. Others described a pattern of sexual harassment masked behind his carefully crafted image of innocence and goofball charm. Lewis had a long-running feud with former partner Dean Martin, and even those closest to him described him as a man who couldn't stand not being in control. Despite public adoration, many in the industry secretly loathed him, calling him a dictator in a clown's costume. The laughter he delivered to millions came at a cost. And for those behind the scenes, working with Jerry Lewis often meant enduring a reign of psychological terror. Now we turn to a man whose icy charm and matinee idol looks masked a dangerous blend of instability, manipulation, and real-life criminal behavior. He was beloved on screen until his darkness became impossible to hide. 11. Charlie Chaplin, the great dictator, behind closed doors. He made the world laugh without saying a word. But behind the iconic bowler hat and cane, Charlie Chaplin was a man with a deeply disturbing personal life, marked by predatory behavior, rage-filled episodes, and a near-total disregard for social boundaries. Chaplin's relationships with underage girls were a poorly kept secret in Hollywood. He married 4 times. 2 of those brides were 16 and 15 years old when the relationships began. In one of the most infamous scandals of the era, actress Joan Barry filed a paternity suit against him, exposing his pattern of grooming and discarding young women. Though a blood test indicated he wasn't the father, the court still ordered him to pay child support due to the overwhelming public outcry. Behind the scenes, Chaplin was manipulative and cruel, often using his power to control his romantic partners' careers and isolate them from friends and family. He was known for firing actresses he had fallen out with, then publicly humiliating them through film caricatures. One former partner described his moods as violent and terrifying, filled with emotional whiplash, threats, and degrading remarks. His politics also put him at odds with America. In the McCarthy era, Chaplin's perceived communist sympathies got him banned from re-entering the U.S. after a European trip in 1952. The government deemed him a security risk, not for his films, but for the darkness surrounding the man who made them. Chaplin may have played the tramp, but in real life, he left a trail of shattered women and silenced scandals. 12. James Dean, beautiful, broken, and bound for destruction, 250 words. James Dean is remembered as a symbol of youthful rebellion, a mythic figure frozen in time at just 24 years old. His roles in Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant turned him into a cinematic legend. But beneath the raw talent and angelic features was a reckless, emotionally volatile young man who flirted constantly with death. Dean had an obsessive love for speed, not metaphorically, but literally. He raced motorcycles and sports cars with wild abandon, once being cited for 10 traffic violations in a single year. Friends and co-stars begged him to slow down. Directors threatened to drop him from projects. But Dean couldn't or wouldn't change. His on-set behavior was moody, erratic, and confrontational. He had little regard for authority, often clashing with directors and showing up late, or not at all. Co-stars described him as a live wire, with unpredictable emotional swings that could turn explosive at any moment. Rumors also circulated about fights with photographers, destructive drinking binges, and a pattern of pushing people away the moment they got close. Dean's death in a violent car crash in 1955 cemented his legend, but it also ended what many believe would have been an increasingly turbulent life. Police on the scene said the accident wasn't just tragic, it was inevitable. He didn't just rebel without a cause, he rebelled against life itself. And in the end, the chaos he embodied took him with it. 13. Wallace Beery, the studio's dirty secret. To audiences, Wallace Beery was the lovable brute, the gruff but charming character in The Champ, Grand Hotel, and dozens of box office hits. He won an Oscar. He was MGM's highest-paid star for years. But few knew that Beery was also one of Hollywood's most quietly protected monsters. Insiders whispered about Beery's violent temper, especially when drunk. He was known for bullying extras, physically intimidating crew members, and using his weight and fame to dominate anyone who crossed him. But it was his alleged involvement in the death of comedian Ted Healy that darkened his legacy forever. In 1937, Healy was beaten outside a nightclub in Los Angeles and died shortly after. Several sources, including FBI memos, suggested that Beery, along with gangster Pat DiCicco and Albert Broccoli, future James Bond producer, had viciously assaulted Healy during a drunken altercation. MGM allegedly sent Beery on a sudden vacation to Europe immediately after the incident, and police quickly ruled Healy's death as caused by natural causes, a suspicious conclusion given the visible injuries on his body. Whether Beery was guilty or not, the incident revealed the lengths to which studios would go to protect their moneymakers, even if blood was on their hands. Former co-stars also spoke of his cruelty to children, especially child actors, accusing him of being sadistic behind the scenes. Wallace Beery wasn't just difficult, he was dangerous, vindictive, and perhaps even deadly, with the industry's silent blessing. Next, we revisit an actor whose fiery on-screen presence was matched only by his rage-filled outbursts and violent run-ins with the law, a man who took the persona of the gangster far beyond the script. 14. Edward G. Robinson Jr., a name stained by violence. While Edward G. Robinson became iconic for his roles as a cinematic tough guy in films like Little Caesar, his son Edward G. Robinson Jr. lived out the gangster fantasy in a far more dangerous and tragic way. Born into privilege, Robinson Jr. was expected to carry on the Hollywood legacy, but instead he became known for his violent temper, alcohol abuse, and brushes with crime. Unlike his father, he never made a name as a respected actor. Instead, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons: bar brawls, DUIs, weapons charges, and even assault arrests. Studio insiders whispered that Robinson Jr. felt overshadowed and emasculated by his father's towering reputation. That resentment festered and often exploded into public acts of aggression. In one incident, he was arrested for pulling a gun during a nightclub altercation. In another, he beat a photographer who tried to take his picture, breaking the man's nose in front of dozens of witnesses. His brief attempts at acting were marred by unreliability, and by the late 50s, most studios wouldn't touch him. He'd become a toxic liability, a fallen prince of old Hollywood spiraling into self-destruction. He died of a heart attack in 1974 at just 40 years old, a man consumed by the same kind of violent energy his father only pretended to wield on screen. In the end, Edward G. Robinson Jr. became the cautionary tale his father never dared to play. 15. John Wayne, the Duke's darker side. John Wayne was the face of American masculinity, stoic, rugged, and larger than life. But behind the heroic image of stagecoach and true grit, Wayne harbored a volatile temper, violent tendencies, and deeply troubling personal views that left many who knew him afraid to cross him. Wayne was fiercely controlling on set. Directors and cast members often spoke of his need to dominate every scene, sometimes screaming at co-stars, physically intimidating crew, and demanding script changes mid-shoot to boost his image. His presence was so overbearing that younger actors were often told, "Don't make eye contact with the Duke unless spoken to." But it wasn't just ego, it was rage. Friends recalled violent outbursts when Wayne drank, and there are multiple accounts of him grabbing assistants or storming off set in blind fury. His relationships with women were similarly imbalanced. Former lovers described him as emotionally manipulative, prone to jealous rages, and incapable of tolerating dissent. Wayne's 1971 Playboy interview revealed another level of his dangerous persona. He defended white supremacy, dismissed Native American genocide, and attacked civil rights movements. The backlash was fierce, even then, but the industry protected its icon. Though he was never arrested, Wayne's intimidating dominance, aggressive behavior, and oppressive worldview made him a man who wielded his power like a weapon. John Wayne didn't just play the cowboy. In real life, he lived by his own ruthless, unbending code, and pity the soul who dared challenge it. 16. Sterling Hayden, the unhinged rebel. Sterling Hayden was the towering, rugged star of films like The Asphalt Jungle and Dr. Strangelove, an actor with the grit of a seaman and the looks of a war hero. But underneath the charisma lay a man at war with himself, consumed by bitterness, rage, and a near-pathological disdain for authority. Hayden served in World War II and returned with mental scars that never healed. He drank heavily, disrespected the studio system, and proudly called himself unmanageable. He was infamous for destroying his own career, walking off productions, and physically threatening directors who tried to control him. But it wasn't just professional chaos. Hayden's personal life was marked by emotional violence. His ex-wife accused him of domestic abuse, and his erratic behavior made custody battles explosive. He was known to hurl furniture, punch walls, and descend into violent, drunken tirades that left those around him terrified. He once admitted in an interview that he felt murderous during arguments, and it wasn't hyperbole. In the 1950s, racked by guilt and paranoia, Hayden named names to the House Un-American Activities Committee, betraying former colleagues and friends under political pressure. But even this act of submission didn't quiet the storm inside him. He later called himself a coward and sank deeper into self-loathing and rage. Sterling Hayden wasn't a Hollywood villain by script. He was one by nature. And for those who knew him, his presence was as dangerous as it was magnetic. Habber 17. Montgomery Clift, a fragile soul with a dangerous edge. Montgomery Clift was one of the most sensitive and compelling actors of Hollywood's golden age. Films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity earned him critical acclaim and fan adoration. But Clift was not just a tortured artist. He was a man teetering constantly on the edge of self-destruction, dragging those closest to him into the abyss. Plagued by deep-seated trauma, guilt over his sexuality, and a perfectionism that bordered on madness, Clift's personal life was filled with emotional volatility and bursts of violence. His addiction to alcohol and painkillers, especially after his disfiguring car crash in 1956, turned his once gentle demeanor into unpredictable rage. Friends described how Clift would fly into fits of screaming, trash hotel rooms, or threaten to harm himself or others when under the influence. He became nearly impossible to work with, and more than one co-star, Elizabeth Taylor included, had to step in to prevent him from spiraling into physical altercations. In relationships, he was known to emotionally manipulate lovers, push boundaries, and use his trauma as both shield and weapon. Those who tried to love him often left exhausted and broken, unsure whether they were helping a wounded man or enabling a dangerous one. Clift's descent was slow, sad, and laced with destruction. His performances were legendary, but behind the curtain, he was a man who burned through people as fast as he burned through himself. Now we move to a Hollywood legend whose unshakable screen presence made him a symbol of strength, but whose real life was filled with secret violence, volatile mood swings, and behavior that left friends and family fearing for their lives. Number 18. Steve McQueen, the king of cool with a temper like fire. To the public, Steve McQueen was untouchable, Hollywood's king of cool, the man behind Bullet, The Great Escape, and The Getaway. He had the swagger of James Dean with the longevity of a bankable star. But beneath the stoic charisma was a man constantly simmering with paranoia, rage, and explosive anger. McQueen's childhood was turbulent, abandoned by his parents and raised in reform schools where violence was the language of survival. That trauma never left him. As an adult, he became known for controlling behavior, violent outbursts, and an obsession with dominance. He carried a loaded gun on set, reportedly to feel safe. One co-star described him as a man always 5 seconds away from a fight. His marriages were volatile and abusive. His first wife, Neil Adams, later revealed in her memoir that McQueen was physically abusive, especially when drunk or high. He struck her, smashed furniture, and often accused her of infidelity without cause. His jealousy was legendary, once threatening to kill a director he believed was flirting with her. McQueen was also fired from multiple productions due to erratic behavior, substance abuse, and violent confrontations. He didn't just challenge authority, he bulldozed through it, determined to prove he was untouchable. Despite the public image of calm masculinity, Steve McQueen was a ticking time bomb, a man driven not by cool, but by deep, uncontrollable fury that turned even admirers into hostages of his wrath. Number 19. Orson Wells, the genius who devoured everything, including people. Orson Wells was a titan, a revolutionary filmmaker, actor, and provocateur who changed cinema forever with Citizen Kane. But behind the innovation and intellect was a man driven by ego, rage, and manipulation. And those who got close to Wells often paid the price. Wells was infamous for his bullying behavior on set. He verbally assaulted crew members, rewrote scripts on a whim, and humiliated actors in front of cameras. He clashed with producers, stormed off sets, and once threatened to destroy an entire negative reel when he didn't get his way. His tantrums were frequent, operatic, and terrifying to witness. But his abuse wasn't only professional. His private relationships were steeped in psychological warfare. Lovers described a man who oscillated between grand romantic gestures and cruel emotional neglect. His long-term partner, the actress and beauty icon Rita Hayworth, endured years of infidelity and manipulation before walking away broken and disillusioned. Wells's arrogance extended to his crew as well. On multiple occasions, he physically shoved assistants, fired entire departments mid-production, and refused to pay staff for weeks, claiming that they should be honored just to work under me. Though never convicted of a crime, Wells left behind a trail of emotional wreckage. His genius was undeniable, but so was the emotional damage he inflicted in pursuit of it. He didn't use fists or weapons. Orson Welles used his power, and that, in many ways, made him even more dangerous. 20. Dennis Hopper, the madman behind the camera, approx. Dennis Hopper burst into fame as the rebellious voice of a new generation in Easy Rider. But long before he became an icon of counterculture cinema, he was already a Hollywood hazard. His talents were extraordinary. His demons were ferocious. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Hopper descended into a maelstrom of drugs, alcohol, and delusion. He reportedly took dozens of pills a day, drank like a man on fire, and carried loaded guns on set. Colleagues described scenes of him screaming at grips, threatening directors, and once chasing a co-star with a knife during a breakdown. His marriage to singer Michelle Phillips lasted just 8 days. She later said Hopper kept her prisoner, abused her physically, and terrified her so badly she fled in the night. Other women recounted similar stories of paranoia-fueled tirades, emotional terrorism, and a man who treated relationships like war zones. On the set of Apocalypse Now, his behavior was so disruptive that Francis Ford Coppola had to shoot around his madness, often feeding him lines in secret because Hopper was too strung out to remember them. He once spent an entire year in the desert, filming incoherent footage while claiming to be building the next Citizen Kane. The film was never completed. What he left behind was a crater of chaos. Dennis Hopper eventually found sobriety later in life, but his legacy remains stained by the years he spent as one of Hollywood's most dangerously unstable forces. Here we arrive at the final name on this descent into darkness, a star whose megawatt smile and musical charisma charmed millions, but whose violent impulses and disturbing private life reveal a deeply sinister legacy. Bing Crosby, America's favorite crooner with a fist of iron, approximately 250 words. To the world, Bing Crosby was the gentle baritone behind White Christmas, a soft-spoken icon who represented warmth, faith, and family values. But to those who lived under his roof, Crosby was a tyrant, cold, violent, and deeply abusive. Crosby's public persona was carefully constructed by the studio system. Behind closed doors, however, he ruled his household with iron discipline and emotional cruelty. His eldest son, Gary Crosby, published a shocking memoir in which he described years of beatings with belts, metal-tipped golf clubs, and fists. "We were punched, lashed, and terrorized," Gary wrote, recalling how even minor missteps were met with explosive violence. Crosby responded to the accusations by denying very little, defending his discipline as necessary. But his coldness extended beyond punishment. He regularly humiliated his sons, comparing them to failures and pressuring them to meet impossible expectations. The emotional fallout was devastating. Multiple Crosby children struggled with substance abuse, depression, and suicide attempts. 2 of his sons died by suicide. Friends and biographers later revealed that Crosby's control extended into his professional life. He blacklisted musicians who disobeyed him and reportedly pulled out of projects if directors didn't cater to his demands. Underneath the affable crooner was a man obsessed with image, control, and total obedience. Bing Crosby sang America's favorite lullabies, but those who knew him best remember a household filled not with warmth, but with fear.